silence in the Galactic Council chamber was so thick you could cut it with a plasma blade. 3,000 alien representatives from across the galaxy sat in their towering seats. Their various eyes, sensors, and appendages all focused on one man walking down the central aisle. Ambassador Jake Morrison's footsteps echoed like gunshots in the cathedral-sized chamber, his step carrying the weight of 3 centuries of human sacrifice. You know that feeling when you've been taken advantage of one too many times? You finally reach that breaking point where enough is enough? That's exactly what was happening here. But on a galactic scale, the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slammed shut behind Jake as he strode to the central podium. His jaw was set like carved granite, his blue eyes burning with barely contained fury that had been building for decades. The tension in the air was so intense that even the bioluminescent crystalline delegates dimmed their natural glow. For 300 years, Jake's voice boomed across the amphitheater. Cutting through the silence like a nuclear-powered megaphone, humanity has bled for this council. We've lost millions of our sons and daughters fighting your wars, solving your crises, cleaning up your messes while you sat in your comfortable chairs and criticized our methods. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of the insectoid species began their nervous clicking sounds, while the gaseous entities started swirling anxiously in their containment fields. Council Prime Executor Velthor, towering reptilian creature with scales that shimmered like oil on water, raised a clawed hand that could easily crush a human skull. Ambassador Morrison, Velthor's voice resonated through multiple throat chambers. Your species has always been adequately compensated for your contributions to galactic stability? Adequately compensated? Did he really just say that? Jake's fist crashed onto the podium with such force that the reinforced crystalline structure cracked. The sound echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap. Adequately. His voice rose to a roar that made even the most battle-hardened alien warriors flinch. When the Nexus Plague threatened to wipe out the Meridian colonies, all 14 billion inhabitants, who developed the cure while working around the clock for 6 months straight?
Humans.
When the Void Spawns emerged from dark space with their reality-warping abilities and started consuming entire star systems. Who held the line for 6 months while you debated the proper diplomatic response? Humans. The chamber erupted in nervous, chittering, mechanical worry, and the electromagnetic screeching of panicked energy beings. Fear rippled through the assembled aliens like a tsunami. They knew what was coming, and they were terrified. When your precious trade routes collapsed because the Helix Confederation couldn't figure out basic quantum logistics, Jake continued, his voice dripping with contempt, who spent 2 years rebuilding them from scratch? Who created the shipping algorithms that keep your economies running? Who designed the defensive grids that protect your homeworlds while you sleep safely in your beds? The silence that followed was deafening. Every alien in that chamber knew the answer. They'd always known humans. Jake's voice cracked like a whip. It's always been humans. We're the ones who show up when the galaxy is burning. We're the ones who sacrifice our lives, our families, our futures, to keep this fragile piece together. And what do we get in return? He paused, scanning the faces of creatures who had ruled the galaxy for millennia before humans even discovered fire. We get condescension. We get treated like junior partners despite being the most competent species in this council. We get our proposals voted down because they're too aggressive, or too innovative, or too human. The ethereal coalition representative, a being of pure energy, pulsed nervously. Ambassador, surely you cannot discount the value of diverse perspectives? Jake laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it when the Andromedon High Command refused to implement our early warning system because it was too expensive? Then lost 3 entire star systems to the Void Spawns? Is that what you call it when the Zephyrian Empire rejected our peace treaty with the Crimson Fleet because it didn't involve enough ceremonial combat? The truth hit the chamber like a meteor impact. These weren't just complaints, they were an indictment of 3 centuries of galactic governance. Every time disaster strikes, Jake continued, his voice growing more passionate, you come running to us. Every time your civilizations are threatened, you expect human blood to be spilled. Every time you need someone to solve the impossible, you turn to the species you constantly underestimate. But here's where it gets really interesting. Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a datapad containing casualty reports that would make your blood run cold. "Do you want to know the real numbers?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the massive chamber. In the last 50 years alone, humans have lost 2.3 million military personnel in Council operations. The next highest contributor? The Valdorian Empire with 180,000. We've lost more people in the last decade than some species have lost in their entire recorded history. The mathematical reality of human sacrifice hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates actually recoiled in their seats. "The United Terran Federation hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately," Jake declared, his words carrying the weight of inevitability. "We're done being your expendable problem solvers. We're done being taken for granted. We're done dying for creatures who see us as nothing more than useful tools." The chamber exploded into chaos. Alien voices rose in panic, translator systems overloaded with simultaneous conversations, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with fear. Because deep down, every single being in that chamber knew one terrifying truth. Without humans, the galaxy was doomed. As Jake and his delegation marched toward the exit, their footsteps echoing like a funeral march, Velthor's voice cracked. "With desperation, you cannot abandon us now. The Crimson Fleet is massing at the outer rim. The Void Spawns are regrouping. The quantum storms are destabilizing the core worlds." Jake paused at the doorway, his hand on the massive handle. For a moment, 3 centuries of human compassion warred with 3 centuries of human frustration. Then he turned back one final time. "That's your problem now," he said, his words carrying the finality of a closing coffin lid. The doors sealed with a final, ominous thud that echoed through the chamber like the death knell of galactic civilization itself. And in that moment, as the reality of their situation sank in, every alien in that chamber realized they had just witnessed the end of the galaxy as they knew it. The question wasn't whether chaos would follow, it was how long they had before everything collapsed. Want to see how small decisions can compound into massive consequences? Just like how the Council's dismissive attitude toward humans snowballed into galactic catastrophe. Check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding, how it can work for you instead of against you. Have you ever watched a house of cards collapse? That moment when you pull out just one card and the entire structure comes tumbling down in seconds? That's exactly what happened to galactic civilization 3 weeks after humanity walked away from the Council, instead of playing cards. We're talking about the lives of trillions of beings, across thousands of star systems. The emergency klaxons had been blaring non-stop for 72 hours straight on Terra Prime, humanity's capital world. The sound was so constant that most people had stopped hearing it, but Admiral Lisa Carter heard every single note. She sat in her office, high above the sprawling metropolis, watching the cascade of distress signals flooding the communication arrays like a digital waterfall of desperation. The holographic displays surrounding her desk painted a picture that would have been unthinkable just a month ago. Red emergency markers blinked across the galaxy like a Christmas tree designed by someone having a nightmare. Each blinking light represented a crisis that would have automatically triggered a human response fleet in the old days. Now, they just blinked helplessly in the darkness. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Brad Wilson's voice cracked as he entered the office, clutching a datapad with trembling hands. His usually immaculate uniform was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot from 3 weeks of non-stop crisis management. "We're receiving over 10,000 emergency requests per hour. The communication systems are overloading." Lisa didn't look up from her reports. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression could have frozen plasma. "Continue." "Helix Sector is under full pirate assault," Brad continued, his voice growing more strained with each word. "The Crimson Fleet has broken through their outer defenses and is systematically destroying their trade stations. The Valdorian Defense Force is requesting immediate backup. They're being slaughtered, ma'am." "Denied," Lisa replied, coldly, her fingers never pausing as she scrolled through casualty reports from previous human interventions. Brad's face went pale. You could practically see the moral weight crushing down on his shoulders. Admiral, the Kepler mining station is reporting critical life support failures. Their atmospheric processors are failing, and they need our engineering teams within the next 18 hours, or denied. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Brad's hands shook as he consulted his datapad again, desperately searching for something that might change her mind. Ma'am, there are 40,000 civilians on that station. Families. Children, they're sending us video messages begging for help. Lisa finally looked up, her eyes hard as steel and twice as cold. The transformation was shocking. This was the same woman who had personally led rescue operations for alien colonies, who had risked her own life countless times to save beings who weren't even her own species. But something fundamental had broken inside her, inside all of them. For 3 centuries, she said, her voice carrying the weight of accumulated betrayal. We've saved their lives while they voted down every human proposal. We've bled for them while they ignored our warnings. We've died for them while they treated us like hired guns who should be grateful for the opportunity to serve. The irony was almost funny, if it weren't so tragic. Remember when your boss used to pile extra work on you because you were so good at handling things? Now imagine that boss was an entire galaxy, and the extra work involved dying in wars that weren't your fault. Brad's voice cracked with emotion. But ma'am, they're innocent civilians. They didn't make the Council's decisions. Neither did our civilians, Lisa snapped back. But that didn't stop the Council from sending human colonies to die when they needed buffer zones. It didn't stop them from using our worlds as staging grounds for their wars. It didn't stop them from treating human lives as acceptable losses. In their grand strategies, the holographic display flickered, showing the galaxy in real-time chaos. Trade routes that had functioned smoothly for centuries were collapsing as human logistics algorithms went offline. It was like watching the circulatory system of a living organism shut down one vessel at a time. The Andromedans are reporting complete infrastructure failure, Brad read from his constantly updating data stream. Their planetary defense grids are offline. The Zephyrian Empire's communication networks are down. The Ethereal Coalition's energy distribution systems are failing. Lisa nodded grimly. All human-designed systems. It's all maintained by human engineers. All taken for granted. Defense grids that had protected worlds for generations failed without human maintenance. Entire sectors went dark as power distribution. Networks, designed by human engineers and maintained by human technicians, simply stopped working. It was like watching a massive machine slowly grind to a halt as its most essential components were removed. Admiral Brad's voice was barely a whisper now. The Arcadian president is offering a formal apology and full council membership restoration. They're promising equal voting rights, increased compensation, even a permanent seat on the security. Council Lisa's laugh was bitter enough to strip paint. Too late, they had 3 centuries to show us respect. 300 years to treat us as equals, instead of useful tools. 300 years to listen when we warned them about the void. Spawns, the Crimson Fleet, the quantum storms. But here's the thing about respect. You can't retroactively earn it. Once you've shown someone that you only value them when you need them, that relationship is fundamentally poisoned. The Council was learning this lesson the hard way, written in the blood of their own people. Every single crisis we're seeing. Now, Lisa continued, her voice growing stronger, we predicted. We warned them. We begged them to prepare. And every single time, it told us we were being alarmist or overly aggressive or too human in our thinking. The communication. Arrays continued their endless symphony of distress calls. Worlds that had existed peacefully for millennia were being consumed by chaos. The carefully maintained balance of galactic civilization was collapsing faster than anyone had thought possible. The Kepler mining station has 17 hours of life support remaining, Brad reported, his voice hollow. They're transmitting personal messages to their families, children saying goodbye to their parents. Lisa's jaw tightened, but her resolve didn't waver. Show me the casualty reports from the Titan offensive. Show me the names of the human children who said goodbye to their parents when the Council ordered us to hold that doomed position. Silence stretched between them like a chasm. Outside the office windows, The lights of Terra Prime twinkled peacefully, stark contrast to the chaos consuming the rest of the galaxy. Ships that would have been launching rescue missions sat idle. In their docking bays, man, Brad tried one more time. What about our humanitarian obligations? Our moral responsibility? Our moral responsibility, Lisa said, standing and walking to the window, is to our own species first. For too long, we've prioritized alien lives over human lives. We've sent our people to die while aliens debated. We've sacrificed our futures. For their present comfort, a holographic display showed another star system going dark. Then another. The cascade effect was accelerating, each failure triggering more failures in an unstoppable chain reaction. They wanted to see what the galaxy looked like without human interference, Lisa said, her reflection ghost-like in the window. Now they know. Now they can learn what we've always known, that freedom isn't free, that peace requires constant vigilance, and that civilization is far more fragile than anyone wants to admit. Outside, stars that had shone for millennia began to dim as civilizations crumbled. The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson about taking essential things for granted. Sometimes you don't know what you have until it's gone, and sometimes by then, it's too late to get it back. The question burning in everyone's mind wasn't whether the galaxy would survive. It was how much of it would be left when the collapse finally stopped. And deep down, even Lisa Carter wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Want to understand how small, seemingly insignificant actions can cascade into life-changing results? Just like how the Council's dismissive attitude toward humans snowballed. Into galactic catastrophe, discover how the power of compounding can work in your favor in our next video. The same principles that destroyed a galaxy can build your future if you know how to use them. You know that feeling when you're driving? You see a massive car accident about to happen in slow motion? You want to look away, but you can't. You're horrified, but you're also fascinated by the sheer scale of the destruction unfolding before your eyes. That's exactly what President Marcus Thompson was experiencing as he stood in the Situation Room, watching an entire galaxy tear itself apart on the massive tactical display. 6 months. That's all it took for the most advanced civilization in galactic history to collapse into absolute chaos. 6 months since humanity walked away from the Council and the domino effect had turned into a full-scale avalanche of destruction that was consuming everything in its path. The Situation Room beneath the presidential palace on Terra Prime had been designed to handle the most serious crises in human history. The walls were lined with quantum processors capable of tracking millions of data points simultaneously. The central holographic display could render the entire galaxy in real time, showing everything from individual ship movements to planetary-scale disasters. Right now, it looked like a medical scanner showing a patient in the final stages of organ failure. President Marcus Thompson stood at the center of it all, his tall frame silhouetted against the glow of dying star systems. His hair had gone completely gray in the past 6 months, and deep lines had carved themselves into his face like battle scars. The weight of being the most powerful human in the galaxy had always been heavy, but now it felt crushing. The Zephyrian Empire has launched full-scale war against the Helix Confederation, General Amy Rodriguez reported, her voice carrying the grim professionalism of someone who had seen too much death. She was a decorated veteran of the Void Spawn. War as tough as nails and twice as sharp. If Amy Rodriguez sounded shaken, you knew things were bad. Estimated casualties, 2 billion in the first week. 2 billion. Let that number sink in for a moment. In the old days, that would have been the population of entire star systems. It was just the opening week of a war that nobody could stop. The Void Spawns have broken through the Outer Rim defenses, added Intelligence Director Tom Jackson, his fingers dancing across multiple data streams. Tom was the kind of guy who could find a needle in a haystack while blindfolded, but even he looked overwhelmed by the sheer volume of disasters he was tracking. Without human battle tactics, the alien fleets are being massacred. The Andromedans lost their entire 4th fleet in less than 6 hours. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Andromedans had been allies for over a century. Their 4th fleet had fought alongside human forces in dozens of campaigns. Now they were gone, wiped out because they didn't have human strategic support. But here's the thing about consequences. They don't care about your feelings or your history. Just keep coming. Sir, interrupted Communications Officer Emma Davis, her voice tight with controlled panic. Emma was barely 30, brilliant beyond her years, and normally unflappable. Today, she looked like she was about to break. The Meridian colonies are reporting complete societal collapse. Their entire infrastructure was designed by human engineers. They can't maintain it. Power grids are failing, atmospheric processors are shutting down, and their population is... Sir, they're reverting to pre-industrial technology levels. That irony would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. The Meridian colonies had been one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, their crystal cities a wonder to behold. Now they were using fire for light because they couldn't maintain the fusion reactors that humans had built for them. Marcus felt the weight of billions of lives settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. The room fell silent, except for the constant hum of the quantum processors and the occasional beep of incoming distress signals. Then, as if the universe wanted to punctuate the moment, another star system winked out on the tactical display. Just like that. One moment there was a thriving civilization with billions of inhabitants, complex economies, rich cultures that had taken millennia to develop. The next moment, darkness. Nothing but empty space where an entire world used to be. Mr. President? General Rodriguez whispered, her voice barely audible above the electronic symphony of galactic collapse. Are we really going to let them all die? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. It was the question that had been haunting Marcus for weeks. The question that kept him awake at night, staring at the ceiling while listening to the distant hum of Terra Prime's defensive systems. Marcus's fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles went white. When he spoke, his voice carried the accumulated anger of 3 centuries of human sacrifice. They never hesitated to let us die. Remember the Titan offensive? We lost 3 entire fleets. That's over 2 million human lives, protecting their homeworlds while they deliberated on sending reinforcements. The Titan offensive. Even saying those words was like ripping open an old wound. Marcus had been a young officer then, serving on the flagship of the Third Fleet. He'd watched helplessly as wave after wave of void spawns tore through human formations, while the alien council members held committee meetings to discuss proportional response protocols. But Sir Amy started, "No buts, Amy." Marcus's voice cut through the air like a plasma cutter. They wanted to see what the galaxy looked like without human interference. They voted down our early warning systems. They rejected our defense proposals. They ignored our intelligence reports. They treated us like expendable tools, and now they're learning what happens when the tools walk away. The tactical display flickered, updating in real time as more disasters cascaded across the galaxy. How the ethereal coalition's energy networks were failing without human maintenance. The crystalline hegemony's communication systems were down. Gaseous Collective's atmospheric processors were malfunctioning. It was like watching a massive machine slowly disintegrate as its most essential components were removed. Every system that humans had built, maintained, or improved was failing. Every strategy that humans had developed was being ignored or misapplied. Every warning that humans had given was being proven catastrophically correct. The quantum storms are intensifying, Tom reported, his voice hollow. Without human storm tracking algorithms, the alien fleets can't predict safe passage routes. The Valdorian Merchant Marine just lost 60% of their ships in a single storm front. 60%. In the old days, human storm trackers would have seen that coming weeks in advance. It would have rerouted all traffic, established safe harbors, maybe even found a way to dissipate the storm before it could cause damage. Now it was just another number on the casualty reports. Sir Emma's voice was barely a whisper. The Arcadian president is offering complete surrender. They're willing to become a human protectorate if we'll just help them evacuate their core worlds before the Crimson Fleet arrives. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. The Arcadians had been one of the most vocal opponents of human initiatives in the Council. Their president had personally led the campaign to limit human influence in galactic affairs. Now they were begging to become a human colony. "Tell them," Marcus said slowly, "that we'll consider their request after we finish evaluating all the other requests." In order of priority based on how they treated us during the last 3 centuries, the room fell silent again. Everyone knew what that meant. The Arcadians would be at the bottom of a very long list. That the tactical display showed vast swaths of space going dark. The great galactic civilization that had taken millennia to build was collapsing in months. Ancient trade routes that had connected worlds for thousands of years were empty. Defensive alliances that had maintained peace for centuries were dissolving into chaos and mutual recrimination. Fear and desperation echoed across. The stars as species that had ruled for eons faced extinction. The proud Zephyrian Empire was fighting for survival. The mighty Helix Confederation was breaking apart. The mysterious void spawns were advancing unopposed through sectors that had been secure for generations. And in the center of it all, humanity watched with cold calculation as the galaxy learned the hardest lesson of all, that civilization isn't built on good intentions or noble ideals. It's built on competence, sacrifice, and the willingness to do what needs to be done when others won't. The question wasn't whether the galaxy would survive, it was what would be left when the collapse finally stopped, and whether humanity would be willing to rebuild what others had destroyed. Want to see how small changes can compound into massive results? Just like how the Council's disrespect for humans snowballed into galactic catastrophe. Discover how the power of compounding can transform your life in our next video. The same principles that destroyed a galaxy can build your future if you understand how to harness them. Have you ever walked through a neighborhood after a hurricane? That eerie silence where bustling streets once hummed with life, where broken windows stare at you like dead eyes, where the very air seems to whisper about what used to be? That's exactly what Captain Ryan Mitchell experienced as he led the human delegation through the ruins of what was once the most magnificent space station in the galaxy. 1 year? Just 365 days since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, and the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable. Where once thousands of species had thrived in a complex web of trade, diplomacy, and mutual cooperation, now only scattered survivors remained. Clinging to the debris of their former civilization like shipwreck victims in a cosmic ocean, the Galactic Council Station had been a marvel of engineering when it was built 4,000 years ago. A massive ring structure orbiting a neutron star, it had served as the diplomatic heart of galactic civilization. Its corridors had once buzzed with the conversations of diplomats from every corner of the galaxy. Its chambers had witnessed the signing of peace treaties that ended wars spanning centuries, and its halls had echoed with the voices of beings working together to build something greater than themselves. Now it was a tomb. Captain Ryan Mitchell's boots echoed hollowly against the metal deck plating as he led the human delegation through corridors that had once been lined with beautiful artwork from 1,000 different worlds. The artwork was still there, but it was covered in blast marks and what looked suspiciously like dried blood. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly red glow, and the air recycling systems wheezed like an old man struggling to breathe. "Jesus," whispered Dr. Sarah Williams, the human medical officer, her voice barely audible through her environmental suitscom system. Sarah was a veteran of the Void Spawn Wars, tough as nails and twice as competent. If something made Sarah Williams whisper a prayer, you knew it was bad. The quantum plague has reached the core worlds. Bodies of various alien species floated in the corridors, victims of the ongoing chaos. Some had died from the plague, their bioluminescent patches dim and lifeless. Others showed signs of violence, plasma burns, projectile wounds, the kind of injuries you get when civilization breaks down and everyone starts fighting over the scraps. Without human medical expertise, it spread to 47 systems. Ryan replied grimly, his scanner showing the horrifying progression of the disease across the galactic map. The Helix Confederation is extinct. The Zephyrian Empire controls maybe 3 systems now, and those are under siege. Think about that for a moment. The Helix Confederation had been one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. With colonies spanning over 200 star systems, they'd existed for over 10,000 years, survived ice ages, supernovas, and invasion attempts that would have broken lesser species. Now, they were just a footnote in galactic history, wiped out by a plague that human doctors could have stopped in its tracks. Ryan's team moved through the station like ghosts themselves, past abandoned shops where alien merchants had once sold wares from across the galaxy, past restaurants where diplomats had shared meals and forged alliances, past viewing lounges where beings had watched the stars and dreamed of a peaceful future. Everything was dark, empty, dead. But here's the thing about rock bottom. Sometimes you have to hit it before you can start climbing back up. The main council chamber, once a symbol of unity and cooperation, sat empty except for a handful of desperate delegates huddled together like refugees from a natural disaster. The massive chamber that had once held representatives from over 3,000 species now contained maybe 30 beings, and most of them looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. Council Prime Executor Velthar, the same arrogant reptilian who had dismissed human concerns just a year ago, was barely recognizable. His once magnificent scales were dull and cracked. His proud posture had collapsed into a defeated slump, and his voice, which had once boomed with authority across the chamber, now trembled like a leaf in a hurricane. Captain Mitchell? Velthor's voice was barely a whisper, and you could hear the desperation leaking through every word. We need to discuss terms for humanity's return. Ryan's laugh was bitter enough to etch glass. It echoed through the empty chamber like a gunshot, and several of the alien delegates actually flinched. Return? You think we're coming back to this mess you've created? The silence that followed was deafening. These beings who had once ruled the galaxy with iron fists and absolute certainty now sat in stunned silence, finally understanding the magnitude of what they'd lost. Please, begged the Arcadian representative, and the sight was almost heartbreaking. This was a being whose species had once been so proud that they'd refused to even acknowledge human achievements. Now tears were streaming down her face, and her voice cracked with desperation. The Crimson Fleet has broken through our final defenses. We're heading for the populated systems. Only human battle strategies can stop them now. Only human battle strategies. After centuries of dismissing human military doctrine as too aggressive or unnecessarily innovative, they were finally admitting what everyone had always known, that humans were the best fighters in the galaxy. Where was this humility? Ryan demanded, his voice rising with accumulated anger. When you voted down our peace proposals with the Crimson Fleet. Oh, when you refused our warnings about the void spawns. When you let us die alone at the Sigma Nebula. While you held committee meetings about proportional response. The Sigma Nebula. Even mentioning it was like dropping a bomb in the chamber. Every being there knew about the Sigma Nebula, where 200,000 human soldiers had died holding a defensive line while the alien council members debated whether to send reinforcements. By the time they'd finished their deliberations, there was nothing left to reinforce except graves. We made mistakes, whispered the ethereal coalition representative, her energy form flickering with what looked like shame. But we didn't understand. We thought you were better than us, Ryan interrupted, his voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. Yeah, you thought your ancient civilizations and your noble bloodlines made you superior to the young barbaric humans. You thought you could use us as your personal army while treating us like second-class citizens. The chamber filled with the sound of alien weeping and despair. These beings who had once sat in judgment of entire worlds now wept like children, finally, understanding that they'd destroyed everything they'd worked to build. The quantum storms are intensifying without human storm tracking, reported one of the surviving delegates. The trade routes are completely unusable. The void spawns control half the galaxy. Crimson Fleet is advancing unopposed through the core worlds. Each report was another nail in the coffin of galactic civilization. Every system that humans had built, maintained, or protected was failing. Every strategy that humans had developed was being ignored or misapplied. Every warning that humans had given was being proven catastrophically correct. Captain, pleaded Velthor, surely there must be something we can do, some way to make amends, some price we can pay. Ryan looked around the chamber at the pathetic remnants of what had once been the most powerful governing body in galactic history. These beings had ruled star systems when humanity was still learning to make fire. They'd built civilizations that spanned galaxies while humans were still figuring out agriculture. And now they were begging for help from the species they'd dismissed as insignificant. "The price," Ryan said slowly, "is everything you have left, and even that might not be enough." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, because deep down, everyone in that chamber knew that some mistakes are too big to fix, some bridges are too burned to rebuild, and some lessons can only be learned through complete destruction. The question wasn't whether humanity would save them. The question was whether there would be anything left to save when the galaxy finally stopped burning. Want to understand how small decisions compound into life-changing consequences? Just like how the Council's dismissive attitude toward humans cascaded into galactic destruction, discover how the power of compounding can work in your favor in our next video. The same principles that destroyed a galaxy can build your future if you know how to harness them. You know that moment in a poker game when someone goes Elin, and suddenly everyone realizes they've been playing with house money all along? That's exactly what happened when President Marcus Thompson walked into the final meeting that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. Except instead of poker chips, the stakes were the lives of trillions of beings across what was left of the galaxy. The final meeting didn't take place in the Grand Council chamber.
With its soaring architecture and symbols of unity.
Those days were long gone. Instead, it happened in a small diplomatic vessel drifting through the graveyard of what was once the Meridian system. Through the viewports, you could see the skeletal remains of what had been one of the most beautiful civilizations in the galaxy, crystal cities that had once sparkled like jewels, now floating as debris in the cosmic wind. President Marcus Thompson stood at the head of the conference table, his presence commanding the room despite its modest size. At 62, he looked every year of his age and then some. The past year had carved deep lines into his face, turned his hair completely white, and given his eyes a hardness that came from making impossible decisions. But there was something else in his expression, a cold satisfaction that came from being proven absolutely right. The assembled alien leaders looked like refugees from their own empires. Council Prime Executor Velthor, whose scales had once shimmered with pride, now looked dull and defeated. The Arcadian president, who had once commanded respect across dozens of star systems, sat hunched in her chair like a broken bird. The last Sefarian commander, representative of what had once been the most powerful military force in the galaxy, wheezed through damaged respiratory systems. "The terms are simple," Marcus announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Humanity will provide emergency assistance to prevent complete extinction. In return, we assume full leadership of what remains of galactic civilization." Words hung in the air like a death sentence. These beings who had once ruled the galaxy were being told that their reign was over, that they would survive only at humanity's pleasure. "You're asking us to surrender our sovereignty," wheezed the last Zephyrian commander, his voice barely audible through his damaged vocal cords. Marcus's smile was colder than the vacuum of space. "You lost that when you proved you couldn't govern yourselves. The galaxy is dying because of your arrogance and incompetence. This isn't a negotiation, it's a rescue operation." Director of Operations Kelly Martinez stepped forward with a data pad, her crisp uniform a stark contrast to the disheveled appearance of the alien leaders. Kelly was the kind of person who could organize a military campaign while planning a dinner party and make both look effortless. Right now, she was delivering the final accounting of galactic civilization. Current status, Kelly read with the clinical precision of a medical examiner. 93% of galactic trade routes are offline. 700 species are extinct. The void spawns control 40% of former council space. The Crimson Fleet has overrun the Eastern Spiral. The quantum plague has reached the core worlds. 700 species. Let that sink in for a moment. Each one represented millions of years of evolution, unique cultures, irreplaceable knowledge, entire ways of understanding the universe. It's all gone because of pride and stupidity. "This is what you chose," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. when you treated us as expendable. You wanted to see what the galaxy looked like without human sacrifice. Congratulations. You're living in it. The irony was almost beautiful in its completeness. For centuries, these aliens had dismissed human warnings as paranoid, human strategies as overly aggressive, human innovations as too radical. Now they were sitting in the wreckage of their own civilization, begging the primitive humans to save them from extinction. The alien leaders exchanged desperate glances. Their proud civilizations lay in ruins, their people dying, their empires reduced to refugee fleets scattered across the galaxy. Some of them had ruled for thousands of years, commanding the respect of billions. Now they were reduced to begging for scraps from the table they'd once controlled. "What do you want from us?" Velthor asked, his voice breaking like a teenager's. The proud reptilian who had once dismissed human contributions with casual arrogance was now reduced to pleading for mercy. "Everything," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Complete surrender of military command. Full economic integration under human oversight, acceptance of human law and human leadership. You will become protectorates of the Terran Federation." The silence that followed was deafening. These beings were being asked to give up everything that made them sovereign species. Their independence, their pride, their right to self-determination. They were being asked to become vassal states of the very species they'd treated as junior partners. "And if we refuse?" whispered the Arcadian president, though they all knew the answer. Marcus gestured to the view screen, showing the dead worlds beyond, the floating debris that had once been thriving civilizations. "Then you can join the 93% of the galaxy that's already extinct." The threat wasn't empty, and everyone in the room knew it. Humanity had already proven they were perfectly willing to let the galaxy burn rather than continue being taken for granted. The question wasn't whether they'd follow through. It was whether there would be anything left to follow through on. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's solid ground to build on, if you're willing to admit you've hit it. The silence, stretched for long minutes, broken only by the hum of the ship's life support systems and the occasional sob from one of the alien leaders. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the drama playing out in the small diplomatic vessel. One by one, the alien leaders nodded their surrender. First, the Arcadian president, tears streaming down her face as she accepted the end of her people's independence. Then the Zephyrian commander, his proud military tradition reduced to a footnote in human history. Finally, Velthor himself, the last representative of the Galactic Council, acknowledging that the age of alien dominance was over. As the documents were signed with trembling hands, Marcus looked out at the stars through the viewport. The galaxy would survive, but it would never be the same. The careful balance of power that had existed for millennia was gone forever. The age of human patience had ended. The age of human dominance had begun, Marcus said quietly. Almost to himself, "We never wanted this. We never wanted to rule the galaxy. We just wanted to be treated with respect." The alien leaders looked up at him, perhaps hearing something in his voice that gave them hope. "But you've proven that respect has to be earned through strength," Marcus continued. "You've shown us that being the good guys isn't enough if you're not willing to be the strong guys too. The greatest lesson in galactic history was now written in the ashes of 1,000 dead worlds. Never take for granted those who die for you. Never dismiss the contributions of those who sacrifice for your safety. Never assume that competence and loyalty will continue indefinitely without recognition and respect." The galaxy had learned this lesson the hard way. The price had been almost everything they'd built over millennia of civilization. But sometimes, the most important lessons can only be learned through complete destruction and rebuilding. As the diplomatic vessel prepared to depart for Terra Prime, carrying the surrender documents that would reshape the galaxy, Marcus wondered, if future generations would understand the weight of this moment, would they remember the price of arrogance? They value the sacrifices made for their safety? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never again take humanity for granted. Asterisk. The end asterisk. Want to understand how small decisions compound into massive life-changing consequences? Just like how the Council's dismissive attitude toward humans cascaded into the complete collapse of galactic civilization, Discover how the power of compounding can work in your favor in our next video. The same principles that destroyed a galaxy can build your future if you know how to harness them correctly.